sparked outrage and unrest across the country and the world about the police use of force doctrine against the African American community. And the world got to know what it meant to end self-publishing. A month and a half later, we also saw police repression against another minority group in another country. That was on September 26, 2014. Dozens of students from the Ayotzinapa Rural Teaching Training College in Villar, Mexico, were attacked by police. 6 people were killed, and police kidnapped and disappeared 43 of the students. Since then, we've never seen them. The Ayotzinapa 43 have become a symbol over the hundreds of thousands of civilians murdered and 25,000 disappearances in the last 80 years, thanks to the U.S. war on drugs. A war funded by $2 billion of U.S. taxpayer money as part of what is called the Merit Initiative. An initiative created to end the war on drugs, but that has only sparked militarization across the country. On November 24, 2014, after the grand jury decided not to indict the police officer who shot Michael Brown, thousands poured into the streets in protest, including myself. In Washington, D.C., 2 days after the non-indictment, there was a protest that was organized by Ferguson. And on November 26th, that same day, we were doing and holding a vigil that was marking 3 months since our students disappeared. That day, some of us were torn. We didn't know whether to attend the non-indictment protest or go to the Ayotzinapa vigil. And it turned out that from the vigil, we marched to Yukon Circle and joined the Ferguson protest. And it was the first time the Black Lives Solidarity started here in Washington, D.C. So at the end of the protest, we joined forces, and here we are once again tonight in a one-of-a-kind event that is marking the Brown and Black solidarity. We know that Michael Brown is only one of thousands of cases of young men and women being discriminated killed by police across the nation. We know that hundreds of Ayotzinapans exist in Mexico and around the world. So, joining us today, we have representatives of what some have called the Ayotzinapa. And I'm very happy to introduce them. So we have the way it's going to go, we have 2 moderators, and then we're going to have testimonies from the caravan, from members of the Caravan 43, of the family members of the 43 disappeared students, and from Mothers Against Police Brutality. So before I do the introductions, I just wanted to thank our sponsors tonight, are the Caravana 43 DC Organizing Committee, DCFerguson, School of the Americas Watch, USTired2 DC, Mexicanos Sin Fronteras, Cosita Seria, and the Guatemala Solidarity Project, and our endorsers, CISPES, which is a committee in solidarity with the people of El Salvador, and CODEPINK for peace. Thank you. Joining us today is Eugene Villar. Eugene is a Washington, D.C. activist with nearly a decade of social justice activism. He has been involved in the anti-imperialism movement, helping to organize most of the largest youth demonstrations against the Iraq and Afghanistan wars, and has been the central organizer with the DCFerguson movement here in the district. Villar has served as a key organizer around police brutality, prisoners' rights, and abuses in the U.S. criminal justice system. He was the organizer of the first demonstration outside of Jenna for the Jenna 6 in 2007, bringing 1,500 to Campton Auditorium at Howard University. He was the founder of the Jobs Not Jails Coalition in Washington, D.C., and led the first demonstration in the country responding to the Zimmerman guilty verdict in 2013. He has appeared in a wide range on television, radio, print media, including CNN, RT, and the Washington Post. He has lectured at colleges and universities around the country, including the University of Maryland, Morgan State University, Howard University, University of Haven, and Temple University. Currently, he is endorsed candidate to the DC State Party for at-large DC Council. He was the 2008 Vice President editorial board of the Liberation newspaper. Maria Lisa is a field organizer at SOA Watch. She was born in Guatemala at the height of the 36-year-long internal armed conflict, which left 200,000 dead and 50,000 disappeared. Her father was disappeared at the hands of the Guatemalan state on August 12, 1982. 32 years later, she and her family continue to search for truth, justice, and accountability. Without further ado, please welcome our panelists and our participants.
Thank you on behalf of DCFerguson, of course, for allowing us to be in this space. And thank you most importantly to the families that are here, both from the Caravan and also Comfort, who is here with us. I think that this is the type of event we talked about, a number of us been together for some time, so it's good to see it come to fruition. I see you smiling and speaking more slowly than normal, so you can get the translation down, so you don't try to stop. So I think really there are, you need to hear it? Louder. Even louder than that. Yell a little bit. All right? I believe me, there's no problem with that. That's good. Normal. Thank you. I think there are a number of ways we can draw connections here tonight. I think the most obvious is in the title of the event, a dialogue of families about state violence. That's a conversation we could have between people from any number of countries. So even though it's an obvious connection, I think it's important for us to go maybe one level deeper when we are tying together these two issues and these two struggles. And I think that there are two ways I want to approach that. And first, I think we have to understand the context of state violence in both instances. First and foremost, it's not just violence by the state, but it is a constituent part of, in both countries, what you may call the regime of accumulation. I think in America, we can look, and we've been making this critique for some time, that while of course, violence by the state against black people has been like that since 1619, since we first came here, but more specifically, in the current era, it's very directly tied, this whole system of police terrorism, and that's what we call it in DCFerguson. Every 28 hours, a black person is killed by a police officer, security guard, or vigilante, so I don't know what else you would call it. But that police terrorism, connected with mass incarceration, it's all part of one continuum, is very deeply rooted and very explicitly linked to the fact that inside of this country, starting in the 1970s in particular, there was a strategy by the ruling elites to change the way things were set up. And to make it long story short, because I only have 10 minutes here, I guess I can make a quick plug. You can read about it in my book, Shackle and Chain, www.shackleandchain.com. But long story short, what you really have is social problems that start to arise, contradictions that exist in these communities, these poor, oppressed communities, and where in the 50s and the 60s, you had an approach that was based on the confidence of the capitalist elites that more or less everyone could be integrated into the rising tide of the U.S. economy, to an outlook based on pessimism, where in order to maintain a situation where a lot of money goes to a very few people, you had to do everything possible to widen the inequality in favor of the few instead of the many. And not surprisingly, that creates a number of different issues. We can express it on a range of ways, but I think most specifically here, we should talk about the war on drugs, which ultimately, in this in the black communities, especially in the northern and western cities, economically, socially, that the crack became an issue. I mean, obviously, when you're looking to get away from this horrific thing, someone's always going to come up with some way to get even higher. Same thing with our recent situation, we have people coming with the bath salts or whatever, the same basic concept. And at this time, that was used primarily as a pretext in order to push a whole range of laws and attitudes whose basic goal was to, you can say, criminalize poverty, but I would say more explicitly contain the social explosions that were not only negative, but also arguably positive. Because it was these same communities that about 20 years before the war on drugs started, that had erupted in the quote-unquote Black Power upsurge, had shaken the foundations of the U.S. empire and inspired people across the world in conjunction with revolutionary movements that are happening in many different countries. So you have a situation where you need to contain that. So you have an ideology that privileges military solutions to social problems. And I know Maria Luisa is going to speak to this, but I think you can obviously draw some very direct parallels, not just to Mexico, but the Americas more generally. I mean, really the entire context for this massive explosion of the drug trade in this country, or in Mexico, or Central America, I should say, was on the basis of what was happening in this country. So that's clearly a direct issue. But I think you have a similar situation with the expansion of the ability of capital, money to move freely across borders, the NAFTA, the hollowing out of the traditional economy in Central America, and a similar sort of piece where the war on drugs, which is a symptom, not a cause, a set of social problems, you have a similar approach, military solutions to social problems. And surprise, surprise, it's the same people pushing the same thing. I mean, you don't have to look very far to see that in America, the politicians who are directly pushing militarization of police, the war on drugs, were the same people pushing all of the various iterations of these so-called anti-drug security policies in Central America. Same weapons, same contractors, same logic. So, you know, on multiple different levels there's deep connections. But what I want to close with, and I think this is more significant, is it's easy for us to talk about the connections we can draw based on our shared exploitation, our shared oppression, whether in this country, in Central America, you know, the way it manifests itself. But I also think that we can draw a strong connection in these two particular circumstances to the unity that we have in the struggle. Because it's very rare in America, and when we started DCFerguson, it was very ad hoc. We thought that it would last maybe 5 or 6 weeks, which is just most police brutality things that kind of burn out that fast. But it became this massive movement, Black Lives Matter movement, which was fantastic. And I think what happened in Ayotzinapa also captured the interest of the world. We were certainly looking at it in this country in a way that, I mean, maybe it's just happenstance the way it coincided, but I think it's very powerful because more often than not, this issue of the border and the issues that come along with it, particularly language, have divided Black and brown communities in this country, despite the fact that we have so many of the same issues that we suffer here, and that as maybe the two sets of peoples, particularly for indigenous people in Latin America, who we did not choose to be put in this situation. Genocide and slavery was foisted upon us. I would say that historically, and even prior to 1492, if you believe I'm a man, certainly and some others, there are strong connections amongst us as peoples of the Americas, and the way we are victimizing us rising up together and struggle is a way, I think, to overcome a lot of the obstacles between our communities by drawing these links, drawing these experiences together, starting events like this tonight. So I will stop there. Only 7 seconds over what I said I was going to, and pass it to